Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Area 312 Rock and Metal Vodcast. I'm Rex, and along with my co-host,
Hi, I'm Kent.
and we also have a special co-host today, friends. We have Keven Crothers from Heaven's Metal Streaming Radio and White Throne Magazine. Thank you, Keven, and welcome back for another episode with us.
Woohoo! It's always a pleasure to be here, guys.
Friends, our guest today was the guitarist for the band Soldier, and he released some other releases after that. And they released two cassettes in the late 80s, and they had two songs on the California Metal 2 compilation. Please welcome with me Mr. Rick Hunter.
Hey, Rick. It's an honor to have you,
Hello,
sir.
everybody.
Hi, thank you so much, Rick, for coming on our program. And we're just going to kind of start at the beginning. And Rick, growing up, was there music in your home? Was any of your family musically inclined?
Musically, I'm not going to say musically inclined, but one of my aunts was in the Berkeley. She think she went to school in Berkeley, and so I heard a lot of the '60s bands like Hendrix and Joplin, and then in my mom and dad's home, our home, I grew up based really with Motown, a lot of Motown, and one of the albums they had was actually Creedence.
Mm-hmm.
Used to listen to that record almost every day.
Cool, cool. And then with music like that and Hendrix and Creedence, when did you start thinking about maybe trying to play the guitar? When did you start playing the guitar then? What led you to that?
I started about after actually it was after I was in high school, really. Then I started, AC/DC and Michael Schenker, UFO.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was Randy with Ozzy, and Rick Emmett from Triumph was a big influence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Boy, there was many, but right now that's what sticks out in my head from memory.
Cool, cool. All wonderful artists too, by the way. So then, were you in some bands before Soldier, or how did that lead into forming the band Soldier?
I was in a I was in a band called, of all names, Night Stalker, and they did release a song on a album called California Metal Underground or something like that. And there was a lot of big bands. There were some bands that got signed that were on that compilation. Um, but I did not appear on the vinyl, but my photos on it. And we
Oh,
played a few shows and I left.
okay.
And I formed with the bass player at the time. He wanted to join forces and do some other, mateys metal. And we kind of jammed for a few months, and then that was that. And the singer actually at that time, he would come to the rehearsals and I don't know if you're familiar with a band called Orgy. His singer's name is Jay Gordon. I was actually jamming with him at that time when we were trying to form a band, but it just never worked out, I guess, in a sense.
So then, like, what were kind of the circumstances for you? You know, I think you hooked up with some guys from another band, and then they formed Soldier, if I'm not mistaken, correct? How did that actually happen then?
I read the newspaper every morning before I went to work, and I saw actually, and Kevin knows this, I saw the Golgotha interview in the Daily Review in Hayward, and we got it. I lived in Fremont, which is about 10 miles away. And I read the article and I go, wow, this is pretty cool that these guys were able to do that. So out of the blue one day, I called Adam Alvarez, and me and a friend of mine went to his house and we talked for quite a while. And then, geez, I can't even remember the time, but later Al Whalen called me, who was in Golgotha at the time, and said, hey, I'm looking to put together a band. And then what was funny is that I had just met Jimmy and Mark, and then it was like I had talked to him just previously to talking to Al. And so it was almost like the snap of a finger, Soldier was kind of put together.
Cool. And roughly, would that have been like an 86, Rick, or not? Or roughly what year would that have been?
It either had to be the end of 85 or the very early 86. I think our first gig was April of 86.
Okay, okay, okay. And then you released your first release in 1987, Louder Than Hell. How did that come about? Yes, Kevin, yeah. I used to have the cassette back in the day, but unfortunately I do not have it anymore. Where was that recorded at, or how did that happen that you were able to do that, Rick?
I think we had played a few gigs and we're looking for management, and Jimmy talked to a manager and she said that Leonard Hayes from Y&T was looking for a band to produce. And we went to this studio way out in I think it was Alamo of all places, near Concord and in between Concord and that area anyway. But Y&T used to do the pre-production there. So we went in there and we did 4 songs. Leonard produced. We actually rehearsed at Y&T studio one time, and
Oh,
and there was some Y&T was going through a change themselves. So Leonard, he went through a section of almost all of it to the finish, but then we actually had to finish it with the
oh,
guy who owned the studio. So it was
okay.
me and
And
Mark.
then I know that those sold very well for you. If I'm not mistaken, correct, that those were big sellers for you, those cassettes, right?
I believe so. I know we did a lot of prints. Like, you do a run, then you do a second run and a third run.
Mhm.
I'm not too familiar about how many runs we did on that one.
Cool.
But
And then
few.
Kevin's here with us. Can you kind of maybe explain like how you and Kevin kind of got there? Because Kevin was your guitar roadie, correct?
Yes.
So how
I
did
was
all
the
that
second left.
happen?
Kevin's gonna have to remind me about that one.
Okay.
So, so I knew Al Whalen in Golgotha. So I had seen Golgotha once at Chabot College for March of Dimes Walkathon. I had bootlegged that show, and so I had this cassette which sounded fantastic. So I learned all these songs. And then about 8 or 9 months later, this is late '85, I went to a it was called Bay Area Christian Musicians, as BACMA, and they're supposed to have a monthly or quarterly meeting. So I go to this church, and there's nobody there, and then like 3 or 4 other cars pull up, and one of the vehicles that pulls up, I see Adam Alvarez and Al Whalen, and I went, Golgotha. And they look at me and say, "Oh man, I saw you guys. Your song's the mark, and this and that." And I'm being the total nerdy 17-year-old kid, and they're looking at me like, "Who is this guy?" And he knows all our songs and this, and he has a recording of us. Oh my gosh, back then, that was verboten, but that's how. So anyway, I talked with him for a little bit, and Adam gave me a flyer because of the prisoner demo, and then about we'll say 5, 6 months later, this would have been early '86. Saw Al. I was working at Dearborn's Bible Bookstore in Hayward, and he came in. I'm in a new band called Soldier. Oh, okay. And could I put a flyer up on the bulletin board there? Sure, that's fine. And I think it was the second show because it was at the MAB, and it was an all ages show. So, which meant it started at 7, I think, and was over by 9 or 10 or something like that. And I remember going, there's maybe, I don't know, 100 people. And I see Rick up there with his George Lynch tiger striped Charvel. And I was just going, oh. And because, and then I knew Al, but I didn't know Mark and I didn't know Jimmy. And then after the concert, I remember talking to Rick, and I exchanged phone numbers or whatnot, and then over the course of time, I remember calling, and I remember talking to Al. Can I come to band practice? Can I come to band practice? Can I watch you guys practice? Because I had done that with another local band called Believer, who played like hard rock kind of metal, and and I and at some point, I don't remember exactly when, after, I don't know, 6 months, 7 months of just kind of going through, and it was like, Rick, could I be your roadie, or I could help you, or whatever. I don't remember exactly how, but it was kind of
Just
how it came together.
just kind of organic and nothing planned, and it just kind of happened.
I think so.
Cool, cool. One thing I forgot to ask earlier, Rick, is who came up with the name Soldier, or what's the meaning behind that, the name of the band, if you could tell us that.
I think we threw around a few names, and Soldier seemed to stick. And well, soldier under standing for what you believe in, basically, is what it comes to, and fighting the good fight, and that's pretty much.
Okay, cool. Well, then in 1988, you release the cassette release Babylon, which is even better, I feel, than the first one. It had better production too, if I'm not mistaken. Correct? Were you at a different facility recording that one, Rick?
Yes, a very different facility, definitely.
Okay. And it has like Where Have All the Children Gone, Borderline, Angel. Of course, the first release had Angel too. I love that song, Promises. That's another great song. By this time, you're doing a lot of concerts and whatnot. How was that all happening, or how was the response to your concerts and that by 1988?
Boy, from the first gig, I know we promoted a lot, and Jimmy was good at marketing and managing, and we had to go to the gigs and put out flyers.
Mm-hmm.
So we
Okay.
made a custom flyer he made a custom flyer with the first show, and there was a lot of people at the first gig. It was a band from San Francisco called Harvey, and they were the headliner, and we were the opener. But we did the band thing, we had flyers made for every gig, and we gave them out, and we sent them out too. We had a mailing list as well.
Is there anything memorable thing at a concert that sticks in your mind, Rick, or something that would be an interesting thing to talk about? Or Kevin, I see you smiling. I know you got probably millions of stories you could tell, but is there anything that sticks out in your mind from those concerts back then?
Go ahead, Kevin, if you got a story.
So the first one that pops into my head was when we were playing the Stone in San Francisco with I think it was TNT.
Oh yeah.
And at that point, we started to stack the cabinets three high. And
That was Y&T.
well, but at the Stone we did it, and the guys from TNT said, "You can't do that. It's not safe." And all this kind of stuff. And we're going, "What are you talking about? No, you have to take them down." So we took them down, and it was just that's one. I can think of a lot. One of the trips to LA, because in '87 the band played at the first His Festival, played at Metal Mardi Gras, and I think it was coming home from Metal Mardi Gras. We had this van, and it was like an old milk truck.
Yes.
And we're coming home. Rick's in my car. A couple other guys are in my car as well. And then there's Jimmy had their Suzuki Samurai. They're driving. And I want to say that Mark, Chuck, and I can't remember, somebody else was riding in the van. And we're driving. I remember we stopped at the Grapevine. We got food. We're coming back home, and they left. And all of a sudden, we're driving along. I don't know, maybe an hour later. Hey, there's the van. Blah blah blah. And we pass the van, and the guys in the van are going like this. Hey, and we all thought, oh hey, how's it going? I mean, there's no cell phones. There's nothing. And we drove to my parents' house in Hayward, and we're all there waiting and waiting and waiting. Well, the van didn't get there for like another 2 hours, 3 hours, because something happened to the engine. They couldn't go over 40 miles an hour. And anybody who's driven I-5, you're doing 70 the whole way. I mean, that was when I can think of a lot of them, and some of them aren't very nice towards myself. So I'll just leave that for others. But
Forgot about that one.
oh,
Well, and just so people can put your band in the context, Rick, they might not know a lot. Can you tell me like who all bands from back in the day that you played with? I know we've mentioned TNT, and I think you did shows maybe with Y&T. What other bands did you guys play on the same bill with, Rick?
We played with Vane, Cacophony, Vicious Rumors. There was a band called Schizo, and Kevin might remember him, but we did that gig with him one time.
Riot,
Riot, yes.
Okay.
Leather Wolf.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Of course, yes.
Well, then in 1988, the California Metal 2 compilation comes out, and Soldier has 2 songs on there. And I'm so excited about that because I knew who the band was. Rick, could you kind of tell us how that all happened that you were able to be on that compilation?
We had a relationship with Pastor Bob Beeman. I think it happened super quick. He called out of the blue and said, "Hey, do you guys want to be on Cal Metal 2?" It was like, geez, I think it was a Thursday night, and Jimmy called me and goes, "We have to go to LA by Saturday." So
Wow.
we went in, got there, we stayed at some friend's house, and then we got there at noon on Saturday, and we stayed there for 20 straight hours, I want to say. Went to the hotel and then went home. And then vocals were done a little later.
Okay.
But the initial songs that were going to be played were Borderline and Louder Than Hell, actually.
Okay.
That got changed in the studio to Tears, and they wanted to use. I know John had a single on there they wanted to use as a single for the album, but they thought they could use Tears for a single as well. So
Was Tears already, you had already written that song? It just hadn't been released by you yet, and you used that on the compilation. Is that correct then, Rick?
yeah, we had it played it live. I think it's on the DVD that was released
Okay.
years
Okay.
ago. I think there's a version. I think there's a
Mhm.
version.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got that compilation. I'm so excited. I'm thinking, hey, most of these bands are going to have a release come out. I'm waiting. I'm thinking, oh, probably within a year, I'm going to see a Soldier, CD come out. And, that just never happened. And I think kind of the question that everyone would like to know is like, why wasn't there ever a Soldier release on a major label, Rick?
Boy, that's a good question. What was the show, Kevin, that Bride played with? It was the one in Fontana, the double.
That I believe that was it was either the His Two or one of the Metal Midnight Two, one of those 2 gigs that we did.
It was Metal Midnight. We played the first day, and then there was a record executive there, and he took us out to eat, and we talked, and then he wanted to see more stuff or hear more stuff from us. Um, I think there was an offer, but it was a very tiny one, and I don't think at the time we just didn't jump at it. So it kind of held back. So to
Mhm.
speak.
Now, would this been from a Christian label or a mainstream label, Rick, if you can say?
It was a Christian label.
Okay, okay, okay.
I
So
re
then, go ahead, Kevin.
I'm sorry, Rex.
That's okay.
I remember Jimmy telling me that they'd had conversations with Jimmy Kempner at Frontline, and Jimmy Kempner had said you could put a motorcycle on the cover and this kind of thing, and I know that the Pure Metal wanted to sign them. Because I had talked with one of the guys from Pure Metal who met with Dave Johnson and I with White Throne. We went out to dinner and had these long conversations and just about the scene in general. And um, the, let's just say that I think for a lot of the bands back then, um, it's all about publishing and how the record contracts are set up to favor the back then more the label versus
Hmm.
the artist.
Correct.
So,
Gotcha. Well, then, kind of, I don't really hear anything from Soldier, and I knew they kind of had, just stopped or ever. But then in 1990, Rick, you formed this band titled Regime, and you record an 8-song demo, and you have new members in the band. And then what was really exciting is in 2004, Retroactive Records, yes, Kevin, releases that, but you've added additional rhythm and lead guitar tracks and some background vocals and added a couple more studio tracks to this. And it's an awesome release. I
Thank
think
you.
it's right up there with the Soldier material, if you want my personal opinion about that
Thank
record. One thing I want to mention, the instrumental Mood Swing. It's awesome, Rick. I love it. I would love for you to release an album of just instrumental stuff like Satriani or whatever. That would be awesome. Could you tell us a little bit about the history of Regime and making that? I know it was done on a 4-track, if I believe.
Okay, Regime. Um, a friend of mine, Dan McNeely, he's the keyboard player. His name is Danny Tatum on the
Okay,
CD.
yes, yes.
Um, he had gone to a few Soldier shows and we became friends. And he told me he played keyboard, so I said okay. And I we played with TNT the last one, and they were one of my favorite bands at the time, and they still are.
Hmm.
So he was really into the keyboard head, that kind of a music,
Hmm.
European metal. So I said, I want to steer it towards that. And so we did. So I know I have the CD here. I got to look at the songs.
Let's see here.
Okay. So he wrote Give Back Your Heart, as far as I know. He brought that in. Waiting for You was he brought that in. The song To Love Again.
Hmm.
We were sitting in the studio one day and he goes, "Hey, I have this keyboard riff." And at the time I'm very much into Ingve as well. And he goes, and I said, "That's a cool keyboard riff." I go, "Let's write a song." And he goes, "Well, we can use it later." I go, "No, let's write it right now." I think we wrote that song probably in like a half hour. And then Straight Through Your Heart, I wrote. Lay It on the Line, I wrote. Love Comes Down. Love Comes Down was actually played one time in Soldier, just musically, and I don't think there was any vocals. It was just, let's play this song and we'll go with the flow. Mood Swing. No, Close to You. The vocalist who's singing on there, we kind of actually hired him to be the singer in the band. And then we were thinking about actually making it a real band. We co-wrote that song. I came up with the verse and the intro, and he came up. No, the I came up with the intro and the chorus, and he came up with the verse and the bridge. And Mood Swing. my friend Tom Young, who I went to high school with, I was doing the Walk the Sky project at the time. And when I got contacted to do the Regime release, I was actually in the middle of doing Walk the Sky. So they said, well, let's do this. And it actually was supposed to be, Regime wasn't supposed to be released till a year later than it was. And then they contacted me 2 months before and said they thought of the release date and they said, no, we're going to do it this year. So I wanted to add another song, and my friend Tom had this instrumental with just him and his friend playing. He played bass, and then his friend played drums, and I know the drummer as well too. And I said, well, let me check that out. So I basically wrote a song over just the rhythm part, and that's Mood Swing, and it was fun to do. And
Mhm. Well, and
so
there's some live tracks too. So, did Regime do at least some touring then as a band, or how was that, Rick?
not really touring. We did 3 gigs. We played in
Okay.
Caldera, and I think somebody just put it out on YouTube about a year ago. Um, then um, we played with Badlands
Okay.
and Little Caesar.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we only did 3 gigs, and I have to
Okay.
thank Jimmy for those gigs because he booked us with those gigs.
Oh, well, cool. Thank you, Jimmy. Yeah. Awesome. Well, and then, like you said, in 2005, Walk the Sky comes out, and I think that sounds musically a little bit bluesier at times, if to me at least, on some of the songs. It's another great album. Um, how you were already working on that when Regime was coming out. So what how was that process with Walk the Sky? If you could tell us.
When the 2000 Soldier release came out,
Hmm.
my friend, I was talking to my friend Tom, and he says, "Hey, I have a studio on my own," and that's where Walk the Sky was recorded. And he said that, and then let me go back a bit. Soldier thing came out, and I thought, okay, we talked about reforming at some point, but that didn't materialize either. So I was writing songs, and my friend Tom goes, "Hey, why don't you just come over and we'll work on some songs?" And my good friend Jeff, who's the drummer, we would go working with these songs in a studio, and then even at his house in just a little area in his home. He had electric drums, so we just rehearsed and then go from there. And then finally, when we were ready, we went to my friend Tom's house and we recorded 4 songs. And then I think it was about 7 months later, something like that, we did another 7 songs, I believe. I think there's a total of 11, I believe. But and then we went to a pro studio to mix it and master it from a pro too. So
So
that was
there wasn't no live concerts of that material then done, right, Rick?
no, we played a few backyard things, and but
Hmm.
that
Okay.
was no tour. As far as Regime, there was no touring, just 3 gigs. Walk
Yep.
this the couple.
Cool. Well, then in 2018, all of our prayers were answered, Rick, because Rox Records puts out Babylon and Beyond 30th anniversary, which is awesome. I'm glad to have something on CD by the band. It's mastered. Um, it has both the Louder Than Hell, Babylon. It has the California Metal 2 tracks, and it also has 4 demos from 1992. And I'm curious about those, Rick. I'm assuming you were doing some demos for a possible label. Is that correct?
Yeah, Jimmy called me out of the blue one day, and we were in contact, here and there, but
Mm-hmm.
there was a label that was interested, and I said, okay, we'll see what we can do. He brought in one song, I brought in two songs. I was in the midst of actually recording the Regime 2 demo while that was going on. So I brought in two songs, and then I had an idea, and I think that's what song was that? Down on the Killing Floor. I think we all worked together on that one as a band.
And I really like that song. That's one of my favorites from the 4 demos, Rick. That's probably my favorite from that.
Yeah.
Well, and also on that, you have your performance, the band's performance from the His Festival from June 27th, 1987. Could you kind of tell us about that concert and how that was to do that?
Well, I know it's dubbed the Mormon Show for a reason, but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
kind of blown away by why that even came uh, to kind of life, actually, why it even happened. But we drove up to Riverside, and then the first people we meet are the guys from Deliverance, Jimmy Brown and Brian. I remember. I think they just flat out asked us, "Are you guys really Mormon?" And I was like, nothing I know of.
I just remember I don't know if it was Mark or Jimmy came up to they think we're Mormons and it's like what? And by the way, Riverside from the Bay Area is like an 8-hour drive, by
Yeah.
the way. That is a long haul.
Okay.
And
And
it
by
was
the
like
way,
it was like 105 outside and that place did not have air conditioning.
yes, it was even
Oh,
probably hotter inside with I don't know how many people were there, maybe 800. I'm gonna guess.
Something. Yeah, there were a lot. I mean, Guardian played, Baron Cross played, Holy Right played, Eternal Right played, Messiah Prophet played, Deliverance played, Soldier played, Contagious, I think, played. Um,
Did Vengeance play at that show?
I'm sorry?
Vengeance play at that show?
Vengeance played. Oops. Vengeance actually did not. They played, if memory serves me correctly, the night before in Anaheim. Excuse me, yeah, Anaheim, because I went with the other guys from the White Throne crew. We went and saw Dave Johnson, Dave Matillo, and Charlie Daniels. Yes, Charlie Daniels was our photographer. We went and saw Vengeance the night before at Set Free Christian Fellowship with the Crucified. And the next day, we couldn't wait to go, you guys have to hear these guys. They're unbelievable. And then that next morning, we see Larry Farkas up on stage
That's why I'm
with,
thinking about
with Deliverance going, wait a minute, I'm confused. And all the guys and all the soldier guys, literally, it was like that guitar tone because Mesa Boogie tone. And it was like, I remember Shorty comes up to me and we're like, "Oh my gosh." You know, we're just going Shorty was Mark's roadie. And we that was I remember the hard part was Deliverance played very early in the day and you couldn't help but headbang and everything else. And then it was 100 degrees outside and there was nowhere to escape and it was just like I'm wrecked for the rest of the day.
I don't know how our guitar stayed in tune, to be honest. It was so hot.
mhm, mhm. So Rick is another question I'm sure everyone is wondering, or do you think there's any chance of any new soldier material, or is there anything unreleased that could see the light of day? Just always, wondering about that.
Wondering. Um, I'll just go through really quick. When we did our first gig, we actually had the gig booked before we even we only had 3 songs. So I remember going to Jimmy and he goes, "Hey man, we got to come up with, we need 6 more songs for this gig." So I went over the house and we had a cassette recorder and I think I recorded 4 or 5 riffs for him. And then he wrote out songs for them. And I don't think we ever recorded or played much of that after the first few gigs. There was a song called Hero. There was a song called, which we wrote later, Don't Want to Be Your Hero. Um, I would say there's enough material, at least for another CD. And I always leave that door open.
Mhm.
We will see, I guess.
Okay.
There is enough material, I think, for
I always remember when I saw you guys the first time, you played Somebody New twice
Hmm.
because they didn't have enough songs.
and Heart of Stone, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, can't forget Heart of Stone.
Mm-mm. So, kind of, what have you been doing all these years after Walk the Sky, Rick? I think you're still doing music in some sort of fashion, correct? Or just playing, or
Well, I also did Billy Fraser's Discern record, the second one. I don't know if I'm sure you're familiar with that one.
no, I am not, but I will definitely look it up.
And I think he is planning another release or getting ready to go in the studio
Hmm.
soon.
Hmm.
And he wants me to play on that one as well. So we'll
Oh,
see that.
cool.
Walk the Sky. We have 20 songs for that. But it's all about timing and
Hmm.
families and schedule
Hmm. Hmm.
and I talked to Kevin about 2 weeks ago, and there could be with it's in the infancy stage, but we got to get together. But there could be another re-release of Regime,
Okay.
the original, not the
Okay.
the doctored one that came
Hmm.
out.
Hmm. Well, and how can friends, interact with you on social media, Rick? What would be the best way for people if they want to, ask questions or just see what's going on with you? Where can they connect with you at?
Um, I'm on I'm on Facebook really, sometimes on Twitter, but
Yeah.
how it is.
Okay. Okay.
But
So your Facebook page is the best way if they
yeah,
want to know what's going on with you, correct?
Soldier does have a page as well on there,
Okay. Okay.
and there's also another fan page that's a fan made too.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Well, there's some sounds like, we'll kind of hold our breath a little bit, but that's exciting to hear, even with the regime thing. I would like to hear the demo versions of those. That would be awesome, Rick.
And what also with the Regime is I don't think any Kevin knows this now, but when we initially recorded Regime, I actually sang it.
Oh.
So there is a demo we did we went to a studio and I sang everything. And when we look when me and Dan would talk and I go, you know what? I'd rather focus on the guitar playing. And so that's when we looked for another singer at the time.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that happened. So the singer suggested, why don't we record at his house? And that's what the Regime release is. I did find the cassette of me singing. So
I
that
remember
Wonderful.
I include that.
I
That would.
remember you giving me that wait, haven't given it to me to play, and you're like, "Yeah, I'm singing on it." I'm like, "Okay," and I remember it sounded good. No, it seriously,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah.
it
I'm
was one of
really,
those
I'm really
things because
interested. Yeah.
life changes. So I mean, I regime. I went to a couple practices, and then it just kind of, life
Hmm.
happens. And
Hmm.
but Rick used to sing back then, and
Hmm.
And the initial Regime lineup, actually, the very first was me and Dan were the main guys. Adam Alvarez was playing bass for us, and Pete Bostaff was a drummer. And you know who his brother is, Paul, who was in who is he currently with? He was in Slayer and Forbidden and all those.
Testament.
Yeah,
And he was in Forbidden Evil.
yeah. So that was the initial foursome, and then what was the band that Vince? Van Voltenberg was in.
Full armor.
We were actually, he was going to sing first, but then he got hired to play with,
Baron Cross.
yes,
Hmm,
so that didn't work out. So
hmm,
he
hmm,
moved on there, and then Adam eventually did his own thing too. So it's just
mhm,
me
mhm.
and then we formed a band around just that at the time.
Okay, cool.
I'd like to know, I like on your guitar, one of your guitars, I noticed you have John 3:16 with the crown and everything. And I'm just curious, Rick, if I may ask, when did your journey with Christ begin?
When I before I started with Soldier, I met this guy and his name is Dion Gomez, and I would hang out at this music shop called Ivor Johnson's Music, and I grew up in Catholic church, and I was an altar boy. I grew up in private schools, so we would talk about we read his Bible and we just talk about the Lord, and then he told me about a church to attend, so I went, I checked it out, and I liked it. So I kept going there and attended and changed my lifestyle, and gave my life to the Lord. And then he gives me this is something part of it too. He gives me this cassette and he goes, "Hey, these guys want me to jam on them." And here's the cassette. And it actually is Jimmy and Mark's band demo. And he goes, "You might want to give these guys a try and check it out." And I like Jimmy's voice from the beginning. So, and as far as that, um, yeah, it was an Assemblies of God church that I was attending at the time. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, another curiosity that I have regarding Soldier, tell me about the deciding factor to get the white cabinets for your amps.
Like, well, Kevin knows this. I'm a huge Randy Rhoads fan, and he had old white
I
cabinets as
think.
well. So then we went to, as far as our first, let me get to the guitar tone. I talked to Oz Fox, and he told me to get this Furman PQ3 unit, which gives you an ultra boost. And boy did it. And then we went to as a soldier went to Nam, or at least a few of us, and we were just walking around and we saw these white cabinets, and it was a company called Music Lord, and we liked them, and so we talked to them, and then they said they actually used to work with Queensryche in Seattle. They're from Seattle, the Washington area, and so we ordered, geez, I don't know how many cabinets. We had 9 aside, so
It was I want to say, was it like, because yeah, 9 aside, there was like 12 of them or 9 of them, I forget, because on your cabinets you had 3 live, if I remember right. You had the center cab, we had 2 Marshalls on each, one Randall, 2 Marshalls, and then all the other cabs above it.
yes,
And that one Marshall weighed like half a ton.
yeah,
And
that Marshall was supposedly previously owned by Ronnie Montrose.
Oh.
Under what Marshall?
that was a heavy cabinet to move. So one of the things that was always fun too was because I was a fanboy, still am a fanboy, but um, I remember at some point after I don't know how many gigs and band practices, you had the pedal boost on the floor. And so like when he would go to solo, you walk over, you punch the thing, and all of a sudden you'd have, and I remember at some point I said I could do that for you. And Rick's like, really? You know, I go, well, and they're like, well, let's try it. And I remember we did it in practice. Initially, he would give me like the nod, but there were plenty of times like when we would do shows where he wouldn't even have to give me a nod because I knew the breaks of the songs, and it would be like I just hit it. I just hold the thing in my hand, and every once in a while he's like, I'm gonna do a burn. He like give me this look, and it'd be like, all right, hit the thing, and but anyway.
Well, that's awesome. So it kind of leads in, Rick and Kevin, I was born in 71, but I kind of around my state of Arkansas, there wasn't a whole lot of bands that came my way, save for Petra and Striper. Always great to see them. Saw Whiteheart, but all of you guys. I mean, I don't want to say that I lived a sheltered life because my parents certainly allowed me to, and they took me to the concerts, but I just didn't get out much because there wasn't an opportunity in my neck of the woods. So, Rick, yourself as a performer, and Kevin, you being involved with the band, and certainly I miss the 80s, and I missed a lot in the 80s when it was happening. So from both of your perspectives, Rick and Kevin, at the Soldier concerts, you all, if you don't mind, just paint me a picture. Paint me a picture of the scene, of the crowd, of the electricity in the air, maybe of the ministry that was happening. What are some of your fond memories about the whole scene back in the day?
Boy, we started off in like the smaller clubs back in Mabuhay, but we actually had a decent following. And the Rock on Broadway we played on one time. It's right on there on Broadway in San Francisco. Then we started to branch out towards the Omni, which was an Oakland that held about 800. And another band we used to play there with was Cry Wolf, and they were a signed act, and they were very good. We would get probably like 700-800 people in that club when we played with them.
Mm-hmm.
We did do. We were asked to do Veins when the labels would come out. They asked us to play on that show when they did when they had the labels come out for them to when they performed. We did that show at the Stone. There wasn't too many shows where there weren't a lot of people there. So, and as far as the scene here in San Francisco, all the festivals that we played were fun. Getting to meet all the guys and all the other bands. What was the one at the Velodrome?
Yeah,
Kevin?
that was metal Mardi Gras. Yeah.
Montana.
So one of the things on the Louder Than Hell tape, there's what they call the studio side and the live side. And the live side was taken from the first time it was at the Mab. Now the Mabuhay Gardens was a dive. Okay, it was flat out a dive, but everybody played there when it was open. But so it was a Sunday night, and Believer played, Cross Force played, and Soldier headlined the show. And it was a Sunday night, and I remember at that time the owner was like, Ness, if I remember correctly, the things I heard, he was like, well, what, 100 people are going to show up? Is anyone going to come to this thing? And I think there were 300 to 400 people in this dive. It was packed. There's all this energy in the air, literally. And so the live side on this, Dave Johnson from White Throne, who back in the day, every time he went to a show, he recorded it. He had bought the most expensive, I think Sony called it the bootlegger special or something like that. And literally, he had recordings of everything. Every cross force gig he went to, every soldier show, Golgotha, Believer, Valor, Blood, you name it. There are some people who are keep posting these little cassettes online. That's all Dave. I kid you not. But there was so much energy and excitement that um, people couldn't wait to come into the show. I mean, it's like when the band played at the Omni, when we brought in Jimmy worked it out, had Guardian, Deliverance, Crossforce, and Soldier. This was December of '87. And there was so much excitement for this. I mean, '87 was the His Festival Metal Mardi Gras, and Soldier was on an ascent in the San Francisco Bay Area. There was this big divide. You had all the thrash metal bands, Exodus and Testament, or back then before they were still called Legacy. They were playing the Stones. Sometimes they played the Mad. They played at Ruthie's. All these, and then you had all of the melodic metal bands. We'll say Soldier, Kid Blue. Vicious Rumors was more of a straightforward heavy metal band, but those guys were great guys. We used to play with them a lot. But there were so many bands,
Did
and yeah.
Rick and Kevin, did you all feel, was there a sense of camaraderie amongst the, for lack of a better term, the Christian metal bands? Was it a kind of a brother to brother thing, or?
We were friends with everybody. I remember Tony Kreider, seeing a few of his shows and talking to him, and actually he used to have a Bible study at his house, and we used to attend. The guys in Believer we'd see every once in a while. We did a show with them at Weeks Park with Believer, I believe.
Yeah.
And they were the opener. We were headliner, I think. And then there was later Mercy, who I think we did a gig with them as well. And
Well,
that's what I remember anyway.
so
It-
go ahead, Kevin.
I was just gonna say, and then we played with Bloodgood. Guardian wanted to play with us, but at other shows, but they bands would come through, and it was exciting. That's probably the one of the best ways to explain it, because it was like you talk with people. I remember there would be times both Rick and Mark and all of the guys would come up to me at different times, like, oh, this guy came up to me at the bar and started asking me questions, and just there was like, Soldier was the introduction, plant a seed. Crossforce was more lyrically, more straightforward, cultivate the seed. And but there was a lot of camaraderie, I think, because I used to see Phil Castillo, used to see Tony Kreider, I would see Adam Alvarez, and just there was a lot of things that were going on back then that in a lot of ways that just doesn't happen at all anymore. And it's because there's no central. It's like when I worked at Dearborn's Bible Bookstore, it was kind of bizarre because it seemed like I met a lot of people because I worked there in the East. It was in Hayward in the East Bay, and the Sean Doty, and that was Veil of Ashes. Their first show was with the Damned at the MAB, and there was a lot of Christian stuff going on in the Bay Area. The Lonely Now, oh gosh, Greg Nordstrom, I believe, and they did an independent. Gideon's Army was from the Bay Area. There was a lot of Christian music, and here's the thing: there was no 24-hour-a-day Christian radio in the Bay Area at all. A lot of places had it in other parts of the country, but not in the San Francisco Bay Area. So.
Just out of curiosity, Rick, not trying to dredge up anything negative, but I'm always curious, what made the band, what made Soldier call it a day? When did Soldier call it a day? I guess I should ask when Soldier called it a day.
Our last gig was the TNT show. I think that was May of '89. But then we did a reform and do when the earthquake happened out here in San Francisco, and we did a benefit show in November of '89, and that was technically our last gig, and we had a different bass player then. What ended the band? Well, I'm gonna say this. I think we were young. And I think we stopped communicating. You have other things happen in your life. When you're starting the band, it's all the band. And then later on, you have relationships, and then things pull you this way and that way. And then I think overall, I think it was the communication that.
Well, you all are so talented. We're so talented, and it's caught on tape, and are so talented. And, and when you're young like that, because, I could relate on some different levels, but there's so much life ahead of you, so many different roads, and I get it, and I'm going to confess now, Kevin, you held up the definitive collection, and that's what I had in my collection, in the early 2000s. Yeah.
That one.
That's the one that I had. And, Rex and I have talked, and, a long time ago, I had to make a big, huge haul. And so my Soldier stuff, along with the other stuff, I'm trying to build it all back. So, yeah. So I never had unfortunately, I missed the Babylon and Beyond, the anthology. So my last question, Rick, because I went back to try to get that anthology, and it's a pretty penny now. I missed it the first pass.
Really?
Is there any talks of the band doing something again, like with Rocks or somebody for like an anthology, maybe for a new 40th remaster or anything like that? Is there any hope of that?
I don't think we've been approached for anything like that. Not that I know of. I know by supposedly the end of the year, Bill wants to release the 4 songs from '92 on vinyl, like a 7-inch vinyl, I believe. And it's supposed to be with another band on the other side. So it's going to be Soldier and then some other band. I can't remember the name of the band. I don't know if Kevin knows, but
I don't remember. I remember Bill telling me, but I don't remember who it is offhand.
I talked to Bill recently. I think he said it's going to be somewhere around the end of this year at some point.
Cool. Well, you guys are so, I can't imagine there not being another remastered, for another decade, because you guys brought it. I'm still fathoming, there's some bands that we've all talked about. Soldier should have been one of those bands that had a big deal, had a big, a big label should have picked you guys up because you all had it. So
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think I'd have to agree with you.
And I don't know if you and Jimmy and company from the band, if you all still keep in touch at all, but it is a great day to, if I may just use the term Christian rock and metal, it's a great day to be a fan of that genre, because so many of the bands that we love and appreciate are still around and back, and if I dare may say it, better than ever. I'm thinking of a few bands right now, but I don't know, Rick, if you and Jimmy and company, if you all have some of those hidden gems and can get back, record some more, I think that'd be awesome.
Well, when we do communicate, we always talk about unfinished business, so to speak, using that term. I think we could. I think something good can happen from it as well. It's just a matter of time and well, we can do it independently or see if somebody's interested. So.
Rick, we're kind of winding down here, and one of my last question is what would you like to say to all your friends and fans, or what words of wisdom would you like to say to everyone?
Boy, words of wisdom. First, I want to thank everybody who was ever involved in anything I did in music. Soldier has always been a big part. Kevin's been, roadie. I wrote a little mini list. My friend Dion, who's no longer with us, Adam Alvarez, Tony Kreider, Phil Castillo. I mean, every one of them had an influence me on somehow. The guys in Soldier, Jimmy, Mark, and Al. Boy, my friend Jeff, who played drums on Walk the Sky. My friend Dan and Regime. As far as, let me see, what was the initial question?
The first part of that question is, what would you like to say to all your friends and family? And then, the second part was, what words of wisdom, or what would you like to say to everyone out there?
If you believe in your music and you feel led to do it, do it. You think you have all this time in the world to do stuff, and here we are. I think it's gonna be 35 years since we've played. Soldier has played anyway. So if you feel led to do something, you just do it.
Cool.
And it's
Well, thank you, Rick. We always close out every one of our interviews with something we call message from home. And as Kent says, we kind of want to keep the main thing. And it's usually I do it, and it's a scripture verse relating to the band or that we're talking to, or the artist that we're speaking with. And the one song of yours that I've really always loved is Heart of Stone. I've loved that from the first time I heard it. And so this scripture that I'm going to read, it kind of relates to that song and the message of the song. And it's in Ezekiel chapter 36, and it's verses 26 and 27. And the scripture reads, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. And I just think that kind of goes hand in hand with that song. So that kind of was on my heart about that. And I just want to thank you and Kevin for coming on here. This has kind of been a personal thing with me, just to be able to talk with you, Rick. I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. And so thank you so much for giving us your time. And if you just stick around for one more minute here, Rick, we're going to sign off here, and we'll catch everyone later. But thank you, everyone. And Kent, you wanted to say something?
I just want to ask our brother Kevin real quick. Kevin, because I know that you were part of the band too, as a techie and backline and all, and anything you'd like to say to all the soldier friends and family out there?
All the other crew guys, Mike Chapman, Chuck Atwood, Shorty, which I know he doesn't go by Shorty these days anymore. We all had a great time, and I think all of us would probably. And then there was Jeff, and I can't remember Jeff's last name, and he roadied for
Sweeney.
Mark. What
Jeff
is it?
Jeff
Sweeney.
Sweeney.
We it was a wonderful experience, and it's one of those things that I gratefully appreciate. Um, and appreciate Rick in particular, just because I was the 18-year-old nerdy kid who, what's guitar tone? What is that? I don't know what that tone. The song's great, but all of the things that I learned come from him and the other guys in that band on the musical side of things.
And
So
I can only speak for myself, but I thought even the four members, I thought everybody who was affiliated with Soldier was kind of a family, actually, family atmosphere. We included everybody. We didn't push away anybody. So everybody was always welcome.
it just,
That's cool.
I would just simply say it was an honor and a pleasure, and one of those highlights. You look back over the things that you've done in your life, and there's still, hopefully, Lord willing, plenty of life ahead of me. But you think about that stuff, and you're going, you know what? That really was a fantastic thing to be a part of.
Oh, awesome.
Well, thank you both for letting Rex and I and our friends out there watching. Thank you for
Yes.
Rick and Kevin. And thank you, Soldier, every member of Soldier. Thanks for letting us be a part today. So
Yes.
with
You're
that
very-
said, thank you everybody for watching. Have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Bye.